is a shir on Likutei Sichos, Chelek Yutes, the 19th volume, the portion of Shoftim Daled, the 4th Sicha of Shoftim. In the concept of testimony, which in our parsha speaks about Edus, Al Pi Shnei Eidim, the Gomer, Yokum Dover, that a matter is established by two witnesses. So we find two kinds of witnesses. Aleph, Eidei Birur, witnesses that are considered witnesses that confirm the fact. For example, a witnessing on a loan. The purpose of having witnesses to a loan is only to confirm that there was indeed a loan that took place. The actual loan is not at all dependent on the fact whether it was witnessed or not. Even were somebody to give somebody else a loan without any testimony, without any witnessing, the borrower has a full obligation to pay back the loan that is taken. So if so, when it says that according to two witnesses, Yokum Dover, something becomes established, what that means is, what becomes established is that the dover, the thing that took place, becomes festgestellt, confirmed, ratified through the witnesses. Something that happens, in other words, regardless of whether there were or weren't witnesses, the factualness of it is established by witnesses. There's a different kind of witness. Base, Eidei Kiyum, witnesses that actually create the reality. For example, witnesses that take place on Kiddushin, when a man gives a woman a ring and says, "You are betrothed to me." That witnessing is a part of the actual Kiddushin. It creates the Kiddushin, because the din is that even if both a man and a woman come and admit that they engaged in an act of Kiddushin, that he gave her a ring and she consented to receive it for the purpose of being betrothed, but they both agree there were no witnesses there. I didn't want to do a public thing between me and her, gave her a ring, said, "You're betrothed to me," in the same language we do under the chuppah. There's no Kiddushin. The marriage doesn't start. Why? Because we don't say that, because even if we know 100%, a million percent that took place, but it must take place with witnesses. This kind of witness actually establishes the halachic classification of marriage. If so, the way we would translate this pasuk in those kind of witnesses is, according to two witnesses, Yokum Dover, the matter becomes uvgiton, that the matter becomes actually achieved and accomplished. One form of witnessing, in other words, just ratifies, confirms that something took place. The other one actually creates that new reality. When a person does a kiddushin in front of two kosher witnesses, the status now of that betrothed woman changes. The same act done without witnesses, nothing happens. So the witnesses are not just to confirm that it happened. Witnesses are to create the new reality. That's what the Torah says needs witnesses. So based on this concept that we're going to refer back to them as Eidei Birur, ratifying, confirming, confirmation testimony, and Eidei Kiyum, establishment testimony. Based on this distinction, there's a few differences halachically. There's a few ramifications. First of all, by witnesses that are there to confirm, because their whole purpose is only to be mevarer. The whole purpose is only to confirm that this deed took place. So when does their testimony become testimony? When do they really become important as witnesses? At the time that their witnessing is being delivered, at the time when they clarify by giving testimony that this matter took place. Before that, whether or not they had witnesses doesn't make a difference. The loan took place. The fact that they witnessed the loan doesn't make a difference until they actually come and present that information before Beis Din. So at the time they're presenting that information, that's when their testimony becomes important. When you're talking about witnesses that are creating something, Since their testimony, their witnessing, it's not about testimony, since their witnessing of the event is actually creating the new halachic status, the Kiddushin, comes out that at the time that they saw it, that's when their importance and relevance becomes. Not when you ask them about it and they confirm that it happened. When they're doing it, that's when their role is being, as witnesses, is being utilized. So based on that, the Rogit Shove Goin explains why witnesses to Kiddushin don't need to go through the cross-examination. I shouldn't use that word because I'm not sure what it means in a legal sense. Shouldn't have to go through the process of Chakira Udrisha. Chakira means to ask questions, to examine, Udrisha, and to again look into it. So there's a whole bunch of questions that are relevant. There's a whole bunch of questions that are relevant in testimony in general. You want to hear where was it, what day was it, what happened. When there are witnesses that witnessed a Kiddushin, the Kiddushin is valid whether or not we ask them questions. The fact that they're there makes it valid. Why is it that they don't require, that Kiddushin witnesses don't require, let's use the word cross-examination? Because Chakira Udrisha is applicable to witnesses where their testimony is becoming through what's taking place in Beis Din. So they're coming, like we said, there was a loan took place. The input, the added value of the witnesses is to be able to ratify and confirm that it took place. How is that confirmed? Only when they're presenting their testimony before Beis Din. For Beis Din, for the court to be able to accept it as 100% true, they need to cross-examine. So therefore, if their added value here is their presentation in court, in Beis Din, so it needs to be done in a Beis Din way. And that's what gives it validity. However, we're talking about the Edus of Kiddushin and similar things. Their testimony is not to establish that it took place. Their testimony is already starting from the fact that their testimony creates the change in status. So then that already happens. The Torah has already said that their testimony is about the Kiddushin. They don't need to be cross-examined about the details of that. That's not what creates their testimony. Their testimony is, the Torah says, their testimony is needed to create the new reality of this woman being Mekudeshes or Megudeshes. At the time of seeing, they were already Eidos. Now, if we want to know whether they're telling the truth, that they were really there, cross-examine them. And since I'm talking here to a wide, talking to I don't know to who, I want to just point out that when we talk about witnesses for the purpose of Kiddushin, creating a change in status from a woman under a chuppah, now she's going to be married, while the witnesses don't need to be cross-examined, we need to, though, however, make sure that they are kosher witnesses, so that they're not related to each other, and that they are observant Jews that are keeping, that are keeping to the best of their ability the mitzvahs and so on. So all of that takes place before we appoint them as witnesses. But their actual witnessizing, if there is such a word, of the event, for that we don't need to cross-examine them afterwards. Their input is achieved without Chakir Udrisha. Very simple, because the Torah gave them this power. Okay, another difference, Gimel. According to the fact that we just said that the testimony is a part of the actual deed of creating the betrothal, the Kiddushin, they actually establish it. So we can also explain another thing. There's a halacha that by everything else we say, if you changed your mind within a period of time called immediacy, toich kedei dibur. Toich kedei dibur is a halachic concept, which means the amount of time that it takes to speak. And particularly, we mean the words Shalom Alecha Rebbe Umeiri, peace upon you, my teacher and master. So it's just a few seconds. But if you change your mind within a few seconds, the Gemara says in Nidarim, for everything it helps. So if somebody take a vow, for example, and he's going to do this and this, and within a split second he says, I changed my mind, I didn't mean to say that. So it's revoked. Except when somebody, the Gemara has a few other things, but the one that Rebbe is highlighting here is, and the one relevant to us here is, except for somebody who did a betrothal or a divorce. In that case, if somebody stood under the chuppah and said, Hariyat Mekudeshes, you're betrothed to me, with witnesses, and he changed his mind immediately, it doesn't help. What's the difference? Why is it that if a guy said a vow, he's not going to eat bread, and then he changes his mind within a few seconds, we say it's revoked? Why, if he says, you're married to me, you're betrothed to me, and he changes his mind within a few seconds, it doesn't work? So the Ran explains as follows. With other things, since they're not so stringent, so a person initially has in his, I would say, subconscious, that he should be able to have regret within an immediate time period. However, when it comes to kiddushin, when it comes to getting married and getting divorced, since those things we know, everybody knows deep down that they're very stringent, they're life-altering, they're life-transitional situations, a person doesn't do them until in his mind he's fully prepared to do that. And so in his mind, it's already a full commitment, so he can't renege on it. Other things, there's something niggling perhaps still, which when he does it, he says, I'm doing it unless I change my mind. Then if he changes his mind immediately, he didn't say unless I change my mind, but that's what we assume. However, when it comes to serious things like marriage and divorce, that person's not thinking that. Okay, that's what the Ran says. Says the Rebbe, however, we need still further elucidation about this explanation, because according to this, let's apply this. It means to say that a person's gemiras das, a person's finalization of his intention really doesn't take place till after kedei dibur, till after the period of speech, right, a few seconds. Which would mean that if somebody gives somebody else a gift, for example, since he can still repeal it within a few seconds, we should be telling the recipient, let's say somebody gives you an apple, he could still go back on it. You don't want to eat something that's not yours. So we should tell a person, wait those few minutes till you're sure that the person didn't change his mind. But we don't have such halacha. There's no such chiddush ever written anywhere that there's a time lapse between when somebody gives you something and you can actually treat it as your own. So we have to say that no. With other things, it does. The deed gets finished right away. That's why we don't tell people wait with a time lapse till you use it. However, the power of speech is such that Hashem allows the koyach, there's a power to be able to repeal, walk back on that which you've already said. Yeah. However, by Mekadesh or Megadish, by marriage and divorce, that power is not given. That ability is not given. There, the deed is finished, and that's it. It's finished. You don't have the power to walk it back. Why not? So that I was saying, based on what we've just explained, we can understand it. Since by kiddushin, by marriage, and by divorce, we just said that the actual deed becomes established through the testimony, through the witnessing. So now, once the witnesses have seen it, it's no longer in the turf of the one who did the actual betrothal or divorce. Because the witness has already established this reality. Other things where the witnessing is just going to confirm that it took place later on for the purpose of ratification, for the purpose of establishing the reality of the fact. So there, it's still in the domain of the one who's doing it. So he can still cancel it. Hashem gives him that koyach. However, not when it's already something that the witnesses established, that's it. The guy wants to say, no, I didn't mean it. It's too late. Or the Rebbe says here in Arah 17, in another way we could present it in another angle, because the Torah said that this matter is established through the two witnesses, once the Torah established it, the Chacham didn't say you can come and walk it back. Okay, so that's an interesting discussion of Nigla, of the revealed aspect of the Torah, about the different kinds of witnesses. Now, the Rebbe moves it into the corresponding levels in Pnimius, in the inner track of Torah, Dalet. All matters of Nigla, the Torah, of the revealed aspect of Torah, are masim, they are corresponding, they fit with the way that these things are also in pnimius, in the inner meaning of those things. So we understand that also all the details that we just established about testimony, we can find their spiritual counterpart. What are the four aspects we mentioned? One is that there's two kinds of witnesses. There's witnesses that just confirm, and then there's witnesses that actually establish any reality. Two, we said that witnesses of betrothal, of kiddushin, are actually witnesses that establish the reality, create the reality. Three, we just said that the witnesses that create a reality, that reality happens when they saw the act happening, whereas witnesses that are just for clarification, it's only when they clarify in court, not when the actual deed took place. Four, a maisa, a deed that's been created through witnessing that actually establishes the reality, has more power. Like we said, you can't change your mind. It becomes a more powerful thing. So these four aspects, we're going to find their spiritual counterparts. So this is a very exciting exposition here by the Rebbe in Pnimi Satera, with in a way that it pertains to what we're doing here in this world. It says in the pasuk in Navi Yeshaya, Atem Eidai, you are my witnesses. Ne'um Hashem, says Hashem. So the Zohar says there's two explanations to what Yeshaya was referring to in the prophecy, saying you are my witnesses. Either Ilain Inun Yisrael, this refers to the Bnei Yisrael, the Jewish people are Hashem's witnesses. Or based Ilain Inun Shemai V'Aro, this refers to heaven and earth, that it says in the second to last verse in Devarim, the second last parsha in Devarim, Ha'idoisi v'chem hayemes hashmai v'aretz, Moshe says, I call today to the heaven and earth to be testifiers. So they are also called those that give testimony, heaven and earth. We could say that actually these two these two concepts that there says as corresponding, they actually correspond to the two kinds of edus we talked about. Ones that just confirm, and ones that establish reality. As we're going to Kiddush Kamon, as we will explain later on in the Sikha. Hey, the Alter Rebbe explains at great length that when we talk about the concept of testimony, if you want to testify about Hashem's existence, in general, testimony only applies to something that is hidden and would otherwise be unknown, true testimony. Something that's a revealed thing, you don't need to have testimony. It's not. Go give testimony that the sun came up in the morning. Everybody saw the sun go up, everybody knows the sun went up. The testimony doesn't apply there. More than that, even something that's not right now known, but it's what's called in halacha milsa da'avida ligluya, something that's going to become known. So that also doesn't require edus gemura, complete testimony, because it's just a matter of time, it's going to be known. Or it's a matter of stage. If the person, sometimes you see something, you tell somebody, like a delayed reaction joke. Tell somebody a joke, he didn't laugh yet. You wait for like a minute or two till it registers what you said, and then you see, time delay. So something that's going to be known, either based on the time or based on an extrapolation. Sometimes you see the gears in a person's brain, and then they get the point. That also is not a testimony. Testimony is for something that wouldn't otherwise be known. That's where the true value of testimony is. What does that mean in its spiritual meaning? The fact that Hashem creates all worlds, or to use the lashon of Zerach Chassidus, the fact that Hashem is within the worlds, Mamali Kol Almin, for that you don't need testimony. That is a open and revealed thing. If a person will just take a look at the way the world operates, you see right away that there's a godly energy that enlivens the world. The world is being moved by something, like it says about Avraham Avinu, that he observed all the constellations and all the sun and the thing, and he came, there's an owner, there is a mover to this world, as it says in Pasuk in Yev, from my own flesh I see godliness. In other words, from the fact that I exist, I know that there's a God. I feel life. And Chazal said that can apply to the entire world. That we said, Mahanefesh Mamalis Aguf, the same way the soul fills the individual body and we feel it, so Hashem fills his world. And since it's imperative and it's clear, according to Seichel, to the extent that even those righteous nations of the world also have a very clear belief in Hashem based on the reality that they see around them. So that doesn't require testimony. Hashem doesn't need us to testify that there is a God. Also, when we talk about emunah, belief in Hashem that is higher than the world, in the lashon of Zohar, the Sovev Kalam, that level that transcends worlds, that also doesn't require testimony, because even though that's not a level in godliness that you can comprehend through your intellect, because remember, we have worldly intellect with the limitations of the physicality that we live in. But through intellect, you can come to the understanding that there's something that's higher than what you're able to grasp. More than that, even more so, when somebody really delves deeply through Seichel, he comes to the conclusion that Hashem is such a great thing, and so he understands simply that Hashem is enlivening the world. Then he understands there must be Hashem that's higher than the world. And then he really, the realization one comes to is that Hashem's greatness and his main day job is not the fact that he creates worlds, that worlds become of him. That would be a big limitation to say that God his whole existence is that he creates world. No, Hashem is vast, way beyond that. And therefore he understands that God is way beyond whatever he can understand, whatever's way beyond the world. But how does he get to that understanding? He extrapolates that. So when you talk about understanding that God is far beyond the world, that's also not really testimony to speak about that level, because it may not be something that is evident or graspable with our conscious mind, because you can't really understand the God that's beyond the world. It's beyond. However, it's something, it's like in a testimony, something that would be revealed. If a person thinks and meditates enough, he's going to come to the realization that there's something that totally transcends all of us. And that's the level of Elikus that one can come to. It's not immediate, but it's just missing meditation and time to reach that level, to understand there's a level that transcends, and that for who the world is an infinitesimal speck, that can be reached also through extrapolation and meditation. So no need for testimony there. It's something that if one just thinks enough, it's gonna be understood. When we talk about testimony that Hashem wants testifiers, that's on Hashem's atzmos, on his essence. That is even higher from the level that's called Sovev Kalam, that transcends the world. That is not at all in the realm of intellect. And since Hashem's essence is something that's totally concealed, there we need to testify, to reveal the essence of Hashem. Just like when we talk about testimony in general, it's to uncover something that's totally concealed. Now we can talk about there's two kinds of eidos, two kinds of testimony. There's the witnesses that confirm that that's the reality. And for that, we have things that have been embedded into the creation, things that testify to the fact that there is a power of Ein Sof, of unlimited light of Hashem, that's way beyond the world. And those are heaven and earth. As it's known, explains the Chassidus, that the vitality of heaven is something that is constantly there. In other words, there's an eternity to them. They don't die. It's not like the stars die and new ones are born. They're there for eternity. I use the word eternity loosely. Only Hashem is eternal, but for the way it seems to us, they're never changing. They're there in an eternal way. And then there's things on earth that have the concept of, and that's called, by the way, kayomim be'ish. In their person, they are there unchanged forever. That's the things of heaven and earth, sun, moon, and all that, stars. And then there's the earth, where we have all kinds of species, but they are kayomim b'min. We see that the species are constantly and eternally here. Because one has another, one begets another, this one gives birth to the other. So where does that come from, that unbreaking and unstoppable chain? That is from the koyach of the Ein Sof. That's from the power of Hashem's unlimited light. And that's why heaven and earth and their hosts, what they contain, they are confirmation on Hashem's atzmos. We see things in there that show on the unyieldingness, the unchangingness, which are the source of them is the omnipotence and the absolute essence of Hashem. So there's testimony here to the greatest level, deepest levels of Hashem. B, there's a different kind of witnessing. That is Edikim, the witnesses that create the reality. There are witnesses that were given the power to, so to speak, bring down Hashem's atzmus, Hashem's essence into the world. Just like witnesses that create a reality of a marriage. And those witnesses are not heaven and earth. Those are the neshamas yisrael. Those are the Jewish people that their neshamas are sourced in atzmus, in the essence of Hashem. And that's why, because their source is in the essence of Hashem, they have the power through Torah mitzvahs, which Hashem gave them for that reason, that purpose, to draw down Hashem's atzmus in the world. It says the Rebbe parenthetically in the square brackets, this is also the inner reason why where's the main place we talk about witnesses that create a reality? It's about Kiddushin, about marriage. Because what's the purpose of Kiddushin, of marriage, betrothing, and then subsequent marriage? Is to have children, pru'urvu. And the concept of having children, you see openly the unlimited light of Hashem down here below. Because the ability for children, to have children, unstoppable till the end of time. So in other words, we have a convergence of two things. Through Kiddushin, through marriage, that's what achieves the drawing down of the Ein Sof down below. And actually, even in Halacha, we see, the Torah says that actually, and that's what's giving testimony about Hashem, the ability for rebirth and ongoing continuation of the species, and which is the purpose of marriage. And that's also the reality that those witnesses actually create the reality of the marriage. And they're also creating the spiritual reality of Hashem's continued testimony here on earth. But we have to understand, since heaven and earth already reveal the power of Hashem's unlimitedness in the creation, so why do we need other witnesses? Let the heaven and earth testify to Hashem's essence as being present on heaven and earth. Why do we need neshamas yisrael, the Jewish people? So the general explanation is like this. Heaven and earth indeed give testimony to the power of the Ein Sof, to the power of the unlimited light of Hashem in the world. But it's not in a way that shows that the world is absolutely not an entity to itself and is totally bottled, totally subservient to Hashem. There's still the reality of heaven and earth. However, the great uftu, the great achievement that is added by the Yidden's Aveda is that through Torah and mitzvahs, they cause that it should be revealed that Einay B'Lvadi, there's nothing but Hashem. They saw how the world is one totally with Atzmos. In other words, they're part of the world, and doing Torah mitzvahs is showing how the Torah mitzvahs, Hashem's reality, is really the whole purpose, the whole function, and the whole reality of the world. There's nothing but Him. Heaven and earth show that there's an unlimitedness of Hashem that's projecting through their reality, but they are reality. I'm not sure I got this nuance 100%. Sorry. Zion. To understand this a little clearer, first, we have to preface what our sages tell us on the pasuk Eretz Yorav V'Shakata, that the earth, in other words, planet Earth, or the universe, was fearful and then it relaxed. What does the Gemara explain this to mean? B'tchila Yara, in the beginning, it was fearful up till the giving of the Torah, till the Jews said, "We will nasim and ishma." And in the end, Shakata, it became calmed down. Before the Torah was given, the world was in a state of trembling. It didn't know if it would have a continued reality. Why? Because Hashem said, if they're going to take the Torah, heaven and earth is going to continue. If not, I'm going to make it like it never was. So, it was not sure about itself. But after the Yidden took upon themselves Torah, mitzvahs, nasim and ishma, then it became relaxed. Why? Because Matan Torah gave a solidity to the future existence of the world. That's it. Hashem is forever going to continue I shouldn't say forever because there's a concept of the 6,000 years, whatever. Now Hashem is making the reality of the world a real reality. Till Matan Torah, Hashem said, I'm going to wait and see if the purpose for the world, the Bnei Yisrael are going to accept upon themselves the Torah, which is the purpose for the world. Great, the world will continue. Otherwise, we'll walk it back like it never was. But now, second, let's understand. The Metzias, the reality of the world is materialism, form and materialism. By definition, materialism conceals on Hashem. That's why it's called Olam. Olam means concealment. It obscures godliness. So Matan Torah revealed more God in the world, so it should have created a weakness in the world. In other words, we also know that we talk about this, that the fact that after Matan Torah, we can make things holy, we can take physical things, make it holy, is because the experience of Hashem coming down to the world immediately created a shock reaction in the world. No animals talked, no birds tweeted. The world became less materialistically coarse. And that's why, after that, we're able to take things and make them holy. We take leather straps and make them into tefillin. But one second, we just said that the world was weaker till the giving of the Torah, became stronger after giving the Torah. On the other hand, we know that if world is materialism, coarse materialism sometimes, that became weaker after the Torah giving, not stronger. So, while it's true that, what does it mean the world was shaky and then it became strong? It means, what we explained it to mean is because Hashem made a Tanai, Hashem made a stipulation when He created the world. He says like this. He told the created beings, wait till 2,448 years after creation. If the Bnei Yisrael are going to take the offer I give them about the Torah, then great, you guys, the world is going to stay. Otherwise, I'm going to walk you back to a stage of tohu vavohu, of absolute chaos, the way it was before creation. So that's what it means that the world became stronger after giving it to her. But that all that means is that, in addition, in other words, the world actually became weaker after the giving of Torah. But there's another thing hanging over the world. Will the world be or not? And that was repealed. That stipulation hanging over the entire reality of the world, a stronger world, a weaker world, it doesn't matter, but that reality hanging over the actual existence of the world was walked back. Because now the Bnei Yisrael, they took the Torah upon themselves. Now that Tanai is taken away. Even the fact that we say that the purpose for creation is Bishvil HaTorah, Bishvil Yisrael, because we say there's the base ratios. There's two things that precede the world as being a reason why the world's created. The reason for the Torah and the reason for Yisrael. However, it would seem to be also an additional thing to the actual creation. Creation is creation in order for something else, for the Yidden to keep the Torah. But it's not that the entire creation is about the Yidden and Torah. So, the reality is, therefore, that yes, with regard to the actuality, the Metzias, the matter of the world, Matan Torah made it weaker. It's only that Matan Torah took away the thing that hangs over it. So how did the world become shakota, become stronger? In other words, that the Ma'amer Chazal seems to say that the world became stronger, not just that we removed something that threatened the existence of the world. Yeah. You understand what he's asking? Chazal tell us that the world became stronger after the giving of the Torah. Till then it was a little shaky. How did the world become stronger? Yes, we took away the threat that maybe Hashem wouldn't continue the world. But that's not a strength in the world. That's just taking away a possible threat. That ever wants to learn, know that the world actually became stronger. How is that? I was going to explain. Ches. So the explanation is, the fact that we see by a person that the intention and the objective of his deed and the deed itself are two separate things. He has an intention, an objective, and now he has the actual deed that's being done for something else. That's only because by a person, the koyach and the poyel, the potential and the actuality, are two separate things. Sometimes there's something in a potential and it doesn't actually develop into reality. They're two things on one continuum, but they're two things. And sometimes your intention for doing something and the thing you're doing are different, right? However, by Hashem, there's a concept called Ein Koyach Choser Poel. The potential is not lacking fulfillment. There's nothing about Hashem. He intends to do something that doesn't happen. The intention and the fulfillment is part of just one immediate reality. So therefore, in the whole, when you look at the reality, the action, the potential is also there at the same time. The reality and the intention, so in other words, when we talk about the intention for why Hashem created the world, if the intention of creating is Torah and Yisrael, so that's its real reality. It's not that I have something black in order to offset white, for example. If my intention is to highlight the white, then the actual black is already the black and the white are together in Hashem's world. So even though from our eyes we see physical reality, but the way Hashem's looking at it, that's, if it's behalf of Yisrael to do the Torah, then that's its real reality. That's its true building blocks. So that's why we find such a concept even in the laws of Torah, where sometimes it's not what you see, but it's what the intention is that actually carries the day. For example, there's a halacha that you're not allowed to take out on Shabbos. You're not allowed to carry things outside to another domain, like from your house to the street. So there's a din if you take out a foodstuff, but less than would be considered a shear on which you are chayav, which you violate Shabbos. So, for example, somebody takes out one mustard seed. That's you're not allowed to do it, but that's not going to be a violation in a way that he has to, that's just bring a carbon or something. It has to be a quantity that can be helpful in some way, a mouthful or whatever. Each foodstuff has its amount. But let's say somebody took out less than an amount that would be chayav, that would earn him, bringing a carbon and so on. But he took it out in a vessel that's bigger. If he would have just taken out the vessel, he would have violated the Shabbos taking out the vessel. But now he took out a vessel that contains some foodstuff, but the foodstuff it contains is less than the amount of foodstuffs that you violate Shabbos with. His potter is not obligated to bring a carbon. Why? Because we don't count the keli. The vessel is subsidiary to the food. We see, is the food of an amount that is a violation or not? The vessel in itself has a violation. No, we don't look at the vessel. Why? Because his purpose for taking out that vessel is just the food in there. So the whole gashmis, the whole physical reality of that vessel is bottled, is totally subservient, it's secondary to the intention he has. His intention is the food. And so actually the keli, the vessel, becomes like an extension of the food. And the food is not enough to be a violation, because it's less than a shear. And so therefore the keli is also considered less than a shear, even though its physical dimensions are that it would be chayiv if you just would have taken out the keli. So you see, sometimes the kavana, wins the race, so to speak. So if Hashem's kavana is Torah mitzvahs, and that's why He wants the world, so that's really the reality of the world. Where do we see this? At least in Niglet Torah Remes. So it says Tes. Again, the beauty of the Sikha is the total shiluv, the total oneness of Niglet, Pnimius. We see, at least in a hidden way here in the Remez, also there's a law in Niglet Torah, in the revealed aspect of the Torah, which shows a similar concept, that the whole mitzias of the world is really Torah and Yisrael. Where do we find it? He says we find it many places in Nigla, but here, I'll give you an example, says the Rabbi, from a Tosfos. The din is that you're not allowed to burn kachim, holy things, from the Beis Hamikdash on Yom Tov. Let's say something holy became invalidated. The mitzvah is you're supposed to burn it, but now it's Yom Tov. You're allowed to make a fire on Yom Tov just for cooking. But this is not really cooking, this is kind of cooking for Hashem in a sense. He wants you to burn it. You're not allowed to burn it on Yom Tov. Why? because it's only for him. The usage that we're allowed to use for Yom Tov, for fire, is for us. So the Gemara says the same way you're not allowed to burn kodshim, things from the Beis Hamikdash that require burning on Yom Tov. Similarly, if it's truma tmei, if it's truma, that which we give to the kohen, and it became tummy, so the kohen can't use it, it needs to be burnt, you're also not allowed to burn on Yom Tov. That asks Tosfos, 1 second, but there is a use for humans on Yom Tov with burning truma. What's the use? You're allowed to have benefit. The kohen is allowed to have benefit from burning truma. He's allowed to put it under his pot to cook. So why can't you put the truma, the unclean, the tamei truma, under your pot of soup to make a fire, to heat up the pot of soup? You're allowed to make a fire in Yom Tov. You're burning the truma now in a permissible way, using it for human consumption, for human needs on Yom Tov, for food on Yom Tov, which that's fine. That becomes a tzorech eichel nefesh, a need that's eichel nefesh, that's permissible on Yom Tov. Tosfos says no. Since there is also a tzorech gavaya, since there's also a need for Hashem's purposes here, because Hashem wants you to burn the truma. It's impure truma. What you're meant to do with it is burn it. So now, since there's an agenda from gavaya, from halacha, from Torah, from Hashem, so batalei tzorech edyat, your own need that you're using it for is subservient and is cancelled out to that. And it's as if the only reason you're burning it is, even though you're putting it under your soup to get the soup bubble, it's as if the only reason you're doing it is for Hashem's reason. That kind of hijacks the whole activity of burning the truma. Says the Rabbi, if you look at the simple reading of this, we have to explain, what does that mean? What's Tosfos saying? Why should the fact that Hashem's got a usage for it also, why should that totally cancel out the fact that the human also has a valid use here? So according to this, we can understand. Since the real reality of everything in the world is Torah and Yisrael, that is the real reality. So when you use the thing according to the way Hashem wants you to use it, in other words, to burn it, you're doing the mitzvah of burning the truma tmeah. So everything else falls away, it kind of dissipates, becomes bottle. The external reason for the world, I'm going to use it to make my soup hot, falls away, and now what's left is, what's the real reality of the world? What's the real purpose of the world? Torah, mitzvah. So that's what I see when I see this truma burning. It's about Hashem's need, and then the fact that I also have a need for it is falls aside. So we see here a beautiful example that of the intention actually becomes the reality of the thing, and that's all we pay attention to. It's almost like there's a smoke screen. The moment you move away the smoke screen, you see the reality. Yud. However, according to this, we have a question on the other side. We explained so beautifully that the whole purpose of the world is, and the real reality of the world is Torah and Yisrael. So why did that wait till Matan Torah? We said earlier it only got achieved by Matan Torah. Well, we just now we're explaining that Bereshis, the very beginning, that's the whole reason, the whole reality of the world is Torah and Yisrael. So what happened to Matan Torah? Why do we say that Shakota, that's when the world got its calmness, got its strength after Matan Torah? Till then also the whole reality of the world is Torah and Yisrael. So the explanation is like this. The fact that the whole reality of the world is really the intention, which is Torah and Yisrael, that's the way Hashem looks at it. However, because by Him, koyach and poel, ein koyach hasa poel, a potential is not lacking reality; it's together. However, from the perspective and state of vision of the created beings, in our state of being, of course, potential and actuality are very far away from each other. So there, from our vision, from our eyes, we don't see or comprehend or feel that elikus, godliness, is the reality of the world. And the purpose is, the tachlis is, Hashem's intention is that within creation, within the world itself, it should be revealed how its total reality is Torah and Yisrael. But then the world and Torah and Yisrael the world becomes one with elikus. That's the Hashem's intention. That only starts taking place by Matan Torah. By Matan Torah, we say that's when the world got its calmness, its validity, its strength. Why? Before Matan Torah, you didn't see in the world any direct connection between Torah and Yisrael. That was the plan. That was the real reality from Hashem's perspective. You didn't see it in the world. And that's why the Geshem of the world, the Gashmis of the world, the physicality of the world, materialism, was strong materialism. It's like it's its own vessel. Going back to the analogy of carrying food in a vessel. Its own vessel, all you see is the vessel. If you're carrying out for the vessel, then it's a big vessel. Of course you violate. We don't see that your intention is just a little bit of food inside. However, by Matan Torah, that's when we got the power to be able to reveal in the world mitzida from its own self that it's real reality. What's its real reality? Torah and Yisrael. That's why the world got weaker but calmed down, but also got stronger. It got weaker. We pulled away this strong external, but it got stronger because the true reality now becomes more revealed, and that's its true chayes. Yudalef. According to this, we can understand the difference between the two testimonies of heaven and earth, and testimonies of the neshamas. Since Nis'ava HaKadosh Baruch Hashem desired that he should have a dwelling place in the lower worlds, what does it mean? A dwelling place means to Atzmos of Hashem, where he himself can be, the essence of Hashem. So that's what actually happened. It right away happened, because we say Hashem, with the potential and the reality, his plan and the actuality, doesn't have any, there can't be. It takes away from the completeness of Hashem, Chas v'Shalom, to say that there's a potential that could actually not be actualized. The potential and the actualization are the same thing. So Hashem already has a dir b'tachtein in the moment he wants it. And that's why, right away, there was heaven and earth that testified on Hashem's presence. That was right away. However, since that was only something coming from above, from the perspective of Hashem's perspective, so it was still something where Hashem was projecting into a world that has its own strength in a sense. Hashem projected, I'm here in the world. But in order that there should be truly a oneness, that the dira, that the dwelling place of Hashem should be felt by the created beings, they should feel they're not here, they're just Hashem, part of Hashem. So for that, the world needs to be engaged through Aveda of Torah mitzvahs, doing Torah mitzvahs by the neshamas. Then they create, by using physicality and by using the physical world to Torah mitzvahs, what is created is a generation, a creation, an establishment of Hashem's presence, Hashem's dwelling place here on earth. From the earth itself. The actual physicality is expressing that. The boxes made out of physical hide are expressing that the whole world is really all about expressing Hashem's glory. Parenthetically, square brackets, this is also the inner explanation of one of the things we said before, that the witnesses that create the reality, there's more strength in their deed, right? We said that's why there can't be any change of mind, in the witnesses that are doing marriage. So here we have this expression when we talk about the Bnei Yisrael being Hashem's witnesses, giving testimony. Through the testimony of the Yidden, there becomes a strength in the creation. The creation calms down. In other words, there's a strength given, because now they're creating the reality that the world itself is feeling and showing how Hashem is everything. Yud Beis. According to this, we could also explain the difference between we as the heaven and earth as confirmation witnesses and us as establishment witnesses. Right? And we said that the witnesses that establish something, the reality that they contribute is at the moment that they're seeing it, whereas the witnesses that only confirm, their reality is only valid when they're cross-examined in court. What does that mean in Pnimius? So the testimony of heaven and earth of themselves doesn't reveal and draw down Hashem's atzmos. Because heaven and earth are part of the world that's called Helem. It's called an obscurement. The whole world, Olam, is from the expression of Helem, of obscuring. The fact that in Shamayim V'aretz we have an expression of Elikus, that's because Hashem chooses to transmit through them. That they should have things that show on his infinity, that show on his never-endingness. But that's not coming from them. Yidden can, in them, in heaven and earth, see the power of the Ein Sof. And that's why even after this kind of testimony, heaven and earth, in a way, Atzmos, the essence of Hashem, still remains something that's unrevealed. It's ne'elam, it's still concealed. Because the world doesn't see it. The shleimus of the birur and the gila, the shleimus of this confirmation is only when we'll come to court. Just like that witnessing, doesn't matter when the witnesses saw it. When does their testimony become meaningful? When we confirm it, we cross-examine. So also, the testimony heaven and earth are giving is not meaningful right now. It's going to become important when Mashiach comes. Then the world will come to its intended tachlis, Hashem's intended fulfillment and purpose. We'll see the power of Hashem, and then everybody will see that power we observed in heaven and earth, we'll be able to confirm, yeah, that's Hashem. That's Hashem that was injecting that power. That was Hashem that was really the power there. However, when we talk about the Eidos testimony that the Neshamas give, fakert, it's happening at the time when we're seeing it, when we're doing it. The fact that Yidnam Mamshech Atzmos through their service to Hashem, that becomes achieved right away when you do the mitzvah. When Mashiach comes, that's when there's going to be a Gilui, what was already done during the time of Golus. Very interesting, the Rabbi has a footnote here, which is something we learn every year several times per Ovis. This is the explanation, 68, what Chazal tell us, Yofesh ha'achas b'tshuva ma'asim tevim be'elam hazeh, better 1 hour of tshuva and good deeds in this world, mikol chaya elam haba, from all the life in the next world. Says the Rebbe, ki la'asid lavai, when Mashiach comes, yeh rak gilu yam shochas atzmus shenasa l'dei asiyas mitzvahs be'elam hazeh. Then, what's going to be then is a revelation of what we did now. But the doing is right now, so it's much better to be in the doing. Then we're going to have the revelation, we'll be able to appreciate what we did. But that's not when it's happening. It's happening now. We're doing it now. Just like the witnesses that are seeing the Kiddushin, they're creating a new reality. Doing Torah mitzvahs, we're creating a reality that reveals Hashem here in the world. And it's happening now. Yud Gimel. Same way there is this concept of testimony above, giving testimony about Hashem. We also have this concept in the service of man down below within ourselves. There is an Avodah that's called Avodah, the service of Hashem, that makes rational sense. That's in the words of testimony. That's something that's revealed, something that's clear, and it's clear we have to do what Hashem tells us to do. There's no question about that. Only a fool thinks he doesn't have to. Hashem tells us to do openly in the Torah, we have to do. Higher than that, there's doing even beyond what makes sense, beyond what's demanded. That already is called Mesiras Nefesh, total sacrifice. But even in the avodah of total sacrifice, that's still not in a way of testimony of doing something that's totally not revealed. Remember, we said testimony is revealing something that's you wouldn't know otherwise. Why? Because even when we do sacrifice, we're talking about looking, what is Shulchan Aruch saying? Say, does the Shulchan Aruch want me to go beyond myself here? Does Shulchan Aruch want me to go to sacrifice? So there's also, it's still related to our finite decision-making process. The highest Aveda is that because when a Jew feels, because he's so connected to Hashem, so connected to the Atzmos of Hashem, because of his essence of his neshama, so his given over, his sacrifice to Hashem has no limitations. He doesn't look and check. He just knows he has to be connected to Hashem. And about this Aveda, it says, Atemeda, you are my witnesses. Through this kind of dedication to Hashem, the Aveda, so through that, Yidden are testifying. Where do you get such a commitment? Only because your essence of soul is connected to the essence of Hashem, so you're revealing the essence of the Ein Sof down below. Yudalet, another concept in this, since the whole reality of world is, as we said earlier, its intention, which is Torah and Yisrael. So when you fulfill that intention, you have cancelled out and rid yourself of any limitations that would be created through the external trappings of the world. If you can tap in and be living in a zone where you're expressing the inner purpose of the world, Torah and Yisrael, then the outer aspects of the world, they cannot fight that, because that's really their reality as well. Which leads us to a hayra, leads us to a lesson. When a Yid goes to do a mitzvah, He doesn't have to worry about what's going on externally in the material things that seem to be holding him back. He doesn't have to take into account his own reality, his own mitzias, his own, let's say his own mitzias, his own limited who he is, and he doesn't have to be worried about the limitations that others may impose on him from around him. Because when you're talking about a mitzvah, everything else cancels out, because that's the real reality, that's the internal reality of the world. So nothing can stand against it. Nothing can hide over the mitzvah. The whole mitzias is only the mitzvah. It's like if you just a loose example, if you tap into the genetic code, into the atoms, and the atoms are with you, then the external is only a result of those atoms. So it can't be that anything outside is going to disturb. You're in there in the inner of what the outer represents. You're doing a mitzvah. You're doing the nuclear power within the world. So nothing can stand in that way. Everything's pales away. And that feeling, that you have the feeling you're doing the mitzvah, nothing else can stand in your way, because that is the real reality of the world. That feeling comes from the concept of edus, of neshama. There's a place in neshama which we refer to as testimony. In other words, it's something that's not revealed on its own, just in your conscious self. Why? It's not tam, that's when we're talking about reasoning, the level of malikul almin, or even then higher than reasoning, but jumping beyond reason into sacrifice. But that does have a connection to reasoning, so that's the level of seviv kol almin. So there's room to talk about the fact that there's also a reality that you have to take into account. Dafka, when you talk about the Aved of Etzem Neshama, the essence of Neshama, that's connected with the essence of Hashem Atzmusa Yisbarach. That's where it can be expressed, and that's where it can be heard by a yid, that the whole mitzias of the world is really likus, godliness, Torah, and Yisrael, and therefore do a mitzvah is the real reality of the world. Nothing can stand in his way. Yasher koyach.